Hey everybody, it's Wade here, and welcome to the ROA remix. Yep, it's finally gotten around to be my turn. You may not have heard me last week. You saw Hugh, or maybe you heard him talk about whatever that last episode was called. This is my first one on the ROA feed here. Anyways, so we're talking about Babel, huh? All right. Not sure how the best way to jump into this. This is a new thing, talking to myself. I've got my quote-unquote Brooklyn podcast studio box, and I'm set up in the bathroom because it's as far away from the baby as I could get. So if it sounds different, that's why it is. Going into this, I don't know what we're doing. I guess this is like a commentary track for a podcast, which is an interesting... or not, or, maybe, yeah, it's really groundbreaking stuff we're doing here. And as you can't listen to a commentary while you're listening to a podcast at the same time, because that would be very annoying and jarring, you'll just have to listen to me ramble and then listen to the podcast and then listen to me. I'll give some commentary at the end. But if you've listened to enough of these, you know the drill, you know how it works. I hope it's entertaining enough what we're doing here. I hope, I always get in my mind, the worst commentary track ever was William Friedkin did a commentary track to The Exorcist, where it's just him going, yep, it's fall, and just describing the action, and she's really upset right there. The demon's yelling it now, and it's like, yes, I'm watching the damn movie, so maybe that'll be what I'm doing here, but I hope not. And again, we've probably said it every time, boy, the sound is really, really something in these early episodes, ain't it? Yeah, so I'll let the podcast speak for itself for a little bit. Just, again, I know how the sound is, especially in these ones. I'm recording from the inside of a box that I'm trapped in. I guess I'm in a shoebox and it's a little bit echoey. I guess I'll just crawl into this box, and once you get in the groove, you kind of don't even think about it, maybe, if we're lucky. But I'm going to jump into this box. Y'all listen to Babel, our favorite episode of Deep Space Nine, and I'll talk to you again on the other side. All right.
Aphasia virus, secondary phase modulators, oh yeah. Lark's true pepper, flame the dark true salt, oh yeah. Glass lunch, judge a bin to let it in, oh yeah. It's time for the plumes in mass decisions.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Rules of Acquisition, a weekly podcast where we will be going through every single episode of the greatest television show in history, maybe or maybe not, or a really good Star Trek television series. Sorry, Enterprise. Anyways, yeah, the Rules of Acquisition, that's what you're listening to. And with me, as always, is James Nolan.
Hey, guys.
And Hugh Crawford.
Hello.
With every episode, it's getting harder and harder to say this is the best 20th century television show.
Yeah, right. No, well, it's important. Maybe not the best, but
it is important,
was
yes.
Of its time and holds up pretty well as an artifact. And my name is Wade Bowen.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all of us. All right. And this week we're talking about what episode? We're talking about Babel.
Babel.
Yes, we're talking about Babel, which was episode 4 of season 1. It originally aired on January 24th, 1993. And the description goes for this episode: the crew and the civilian population of Deep Space Nine begin to speak gibberish when a plague and a aphasia virus engineered by the Bajorans as a weapon against the Cardassians accidentally gets released into the station's atmosphere. That's what we're looking at for this week.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's early on and they wanted to establish that they had, what was that original series episode, The Naked Time or whatever, where everybody gets disease and goes crazy?
Yes. That's the one where, the famous one where Sulu plays with a sword.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Next Generation version of that is the one where Data fucks Tasha Yar.
Oh, right.
Right. Star Trek Deep Space Nine is a show with obligations. It has to. They're obligated to. They're obligated to do the weird shit happens in space motif of Star Trek.
Right.
But this time they try to like ham-fisted job of tying it in with the overall arc of this show. Isn't that about right? What do you guys think about that?
Right.
I think you're right.
I think now that Gene Roddenberry's dead, they can do all these homages that they didn't do on Next Generation. Or they did the Disease Crazy Naked Time episode, but did they have like a Mirror Universe episode? Spoilers, that happens later in Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, they do.
And that's like a callback. They do a Tribbles.
Oh, yeah. Let's not even get into that.
Also, guys, I want to start off on something positive. The next episode is Captain Pursuit, which is a great Deep Space Nine episode.
Okay.
So, let's just hold on until next week.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically this episode starts and nothing on the station works. Basically, we learn that the station sucks.
Yes.
And being Chief O'Brien sucks because he's the one that's responsible for fixing everything.
Yes.
Apparently single-handedly. He doesn't have a crew. He doesn't have anybody under him.
Well, he does, but they looked like did you see them when they were down in the pits working on something and they looked at like hippies looking at a glow light? They were just like, wow, they were just waving their little glow wands over like a light board,
Right.
And they were just distracted. So his crew is essentially Miley Cyrus. He's got to go do these things. So yeah,
he's trying to fix. He's out of his depth a little bit here. He's a man alone.
Yes, he is. He's a man alone.
So is everyone on this station a man alone to themselves?
Everyone except for Dax, who is a woman for the first time in 80 years.
Right. Yeah, we got sex positive Dax back for an episode.
We did get sex positive Dax back.
We got her back for like 2 minutes. She actually starts talking about what it's like to be a woman again. And I thought, Dax gets to do something interesting for the first time in a while. And
nope.
Like just about that time, somebody comes down with their jibber jabber disease.
She just got her Adari and pudding, and then
isn't that about right? So what did you guys think about this episode overall? Anything you want to unpack right away?
I want to unpack the biggest mystery of this whole episode. What the hell did that hippie Klingon have in his ship that was so damn important?
The most boring person on the station, you mean? Hey, I have a boarding shipment.
Yes, he's berating. Yes. What was his deal? What was his... Like, at some point, I thought that would be a plot point because he was so weird and pushy. And he was clearly, like, a hippie Klingon. He was yelling at O'Brien in the teaser. They did it again. In each act, they went back to him.
Right.
And I know at the end he leaves the ship, but at no point there was like, why the hell is this guy acting so irrationally?
Yeah, they didn't explain that at all.
That's just life on the station. People are pains in the ass. He had to be somewhere. He had all his crew stuck in a airlock for days or whatever.
And they just let that guy die. They made like no attempts to save him, did they?
Oh,
no,
did.
They made no attempt.
They tried, but he turned it. Well, yeah, no. Odo pulls him out when he's the dumbass.
Oh, okay. Did I miss that twice?
Yeah. Like we're trying to release the docking things, but he's got his engine on, so the clamps won't release because he's pulling against them so much.
Mm-hmm.
So then they're like, well, we're just going to blow the clamps up and just blow his ship away from the station so he doesn't take the station out with it.
Yeah, but I didn't say that. Did Odo get him out of the ship before he did that?
Yeah, he passed out, or he succumbed to the smoke inhalation conveniently right outside the loading dock or whatever.
Okay.
Clamps or whatever. And then, so Odo saves him.
Okay, cool.
And the ship blows up.
Yeah, I don't got much to talk about on this episode.
So O'Brien seemed to get the gibberish. He seemed to get on my nerves a little bit. What did Kira do for you this time, James?
Well, on the gibberish, I have a little bit about the writer actually goes into length on something that I saw online about how he wrote it, which is a little bit interesting to me. He just started writing gibberish and he was like, this isn't working. And so then he wrote the whole screenplay with them actually saying...
Because that's a lot of work.
No, he actually went through a lot more work. So he wrote the whole screenplay and wrote all of their lines out as what they thought they were saying.
Yeah.
And then broke that into like the traditional how it metered.
Oh my God.
And then wrote the nonsense words in the same meter.
Oh, okay.
So it had to be like the words had to flow under the same sort of structure as the words that whatever meter they would naturally use to say the whatever line, they had to write words that fit that meter.
That makes sense.
It's a pretty interesting way to do it because I guess...
Not as interesting as throwing that paper in the trash and starting a whole new plot for Star Trek when you're writing it.
I bet the actors were very happy to... now I can think about my motivation while I act badly.
Yeah. Ira Stephen Beyer, which I believe was the showrunner at this time, it was his story, I think. So I think it was like a pet story. He didn't normally write stories. It was his first writing credit. He doesn't have much afterwards.
Oh, it's one he'd been holding on to when Gene Roddenberry said, no, that's dumb. And then Roddenberry dies and he can finally do the one that he wanted to do on Next Generation.
This is the season where you can still tell that the Next Generation still kept the good ones. They still kept Brian Braga. They still kept the guy who wrote Deep Space Nine. So they've still got the best writers writing their storylines. So yeah, this episode had some flow issues. Kira I guess she was fine.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Kira in this one. So if I really enjoyed her, I scale it back to she was fine for you. Because she actually does something for the first time in like 3 Star Trek series that frustrates me to no end that the other Starfleet officers don't do, which is just transport somebody against their will.
Oh, he just kidnaps a fucker, yeah.
Yeah.
And contaminates him.
Right. No, I thought that was a baller move. I thought that was really cool. It was the most interesting...
It's like, she's not in Starfleet. She can do that kind of shit.
Yeah. By not being in Starfleet, she can operate outside the rules and, really, Starfleet still benefits.
That's true. She's not bound by any of that shit. Yeah, you're right.
Which makes her more interesting than your average first officer in Starfleet.
Yeah, and in fact, they should have crystallized that a little bit in the writing, where he was like, you can't do that. You can't kidnap a big cat. And she's like, I don't have to follow your Starfleet rules,
Right.
Right. Well, Cisco starts to be like, no, I'm not going to let you do that. And then Odo is like, you better let her.
Or what if Cisco had the idea and he's like, you have to do it because I can't break these rules. I got a pension I got to worry about, but you don't. Another little thing that I thought was fun is that because it was O'Brien who had the aphasia symptom first, there was that one line that he has that they do it where they tease that it's fixing to happen about something about Keiko and Jake. And he says something, and both times I watched it, it didn't level to me because I just assumed he was using some sort of Irish brogue or using some sort of like Cockney slang. And like at some point, I would wanted one of the like they just go, Chief O'Brien, we don't understand you and your Cockney slang. Okay, just talk like a normal person.
Like he had too much synthahol.
Yes, too much synthahol.
Yeah,
that's what I got.
Yeah.
I fell asleep both times I was watching this episode. And I tapped out.
Oh, you ran out of juice?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Well, I had a couple of additional points about this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot.
So I feel like we're supposed to learn something about the Quark and Odo dynamic, but that part seems to really fall flat for me. I don't know what this episode was trying to... I think they were trying to do some character development with Odo and Quark in this episode, but I felt like it really felt flat and it didn't actually move the ball down the field at all.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Don't you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like, I'm gonna do the Vulcan neck pinch on this guy in the bar.
Yes. And I think we came really close to getting a description of how Dabo is played, and then they pussied out of it right at the end when they're like, I don't have time to learn about Dabo. And I was like,
right.
That's the only interesting thing that would come out of this episode.
Oh, yeah. It was like Odo admitting he masturbates or something. Like, I never... He was so meek. I never
learned how to Dabo.
Well, and that's the thing is that's actually one of the things that I would have. That's my thing of the week that I would change with this particular script. Is I don't believe for a minute that Odo, being the great detective that he is, doesn't understand how the gambling works in that establishment.
Yeah, how does he understand the graph?
It's wrong for the character. Because if he doesn't
That's
understand...
why he feels like he got caught masturbating, because it's something he should know, and it's like embarrassing.
But it's an actual hindrance to him doing a good job at his job. So, like...
Yeah, how is he going to know if people are cheating if he doesn't know the rules?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, just look up a tutorial on YouTube or something. It's easy.
Go to the Dabo life hack section.
You know there is. If Bajor has the internet.
Oh, there probably is, now that I think about it. We'll put that on the Tumblr if there is.
So that was kind of, that rang kind of false to me that he wouldn't actually know how to play Dabo. You know, I'm sure he would know the rules.
Right.
Also, I find it like, are we supposed to believe that Quark's bar is just a part of his sort of financial income? More like a money laundering scheme, like, you know, like the Bada Bing was in The Sopranos, where he's got money coming in from other off-book sources that just sort of, he's using that, it's laundering that for him, which is what I always thought, is that he was in all kinds of crap. And so 3 days of no business doesn't look that bad to him.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that's a great point.
I think the writers don't know what he's supposed to be. Because as it goes on, and there's other episodes later on in the series where he's got some scheme, but I feel like they don't know what the hell's going on with Quark's Bar. Like, does he pay rent to the Federation or the Bajorans, I guess?
Yeah, I just assumed that he was like a gangster, you know, who was, if you needed drugs or you needed prostitutes or, you know, you need any of the, he was running the black market. And the shop was just sort of his friendly face to, like, keep that afloat.
Right.
If he really is just, like, a booze and craps table guy, I mean, why is he the biggest threat on the ship to Odo? Like...
Right.
I think that's just the writers, like, they wanted him to be that, and then after, like, oh... Wait, we have to make him likable. We can't make him that bad a guy.
Oh, I guess this is before the age of difficult men on television,
exactly.
Where we can love murderers and shit. So, like, they are like, we can't make him a gangster.
Right.
Yeah, I just...
Wait a minute. You're saying that Quark would have benefited a lot from, like, Tony Soprano. If the Tony Soprano came before Star Trek Deep Space Nine,
yes.
Quark would have been a completely different character.
He would have essentially been the little Stevie Van Zandt character.
I'll admit my previous statement that this is the greatest television show ever. We'll say this is the greatest.
Pre-Sopranos. Yeah, no, I think that works. Pre-Sopranos.
Well, it's still a little hyperbolic, maybe.
This is the greatest Star Trek series. This is the show we're most interested in talking about on this podcast.
Right.
Right. The greatest show that we wanted to have a podcast about.
Exactly. I don't know. I want Quark to be this more interesting character, especially if they built him on, like, the saloon keeper from a western town. But to me now, that's Al Swearingen from Deadwood, and Quark is quite a bit like the Disney version of that.
Right.
And no, I mean, isn't he running schemes to, like, smuggle shit into other quadrants? And don't they even entice him at a point where we just opened the wormhole and there's a lot of business to happen in the wormhole through people smuggling people through the wormhole? Like, I just assumed that Quark was, like, the good face of a pretty ugly empire. But I don't know. These kind of shows, it bothers me, and especially that I know that they do go there eventually. But you have to sit through these, like, episodes early on where they're just scraping at the surface with, like, a fingernail.
Right.
You know, like, go a little deeper into this.
Another place it could have gone deeper is Kira actually wrestling with the fact that this virus that's going to kill everybody on the station was built by her people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that seems like it wasn't even, like, there was no, she didn't wrestle with that at all. I guess maybe it's because she grew up in a world where, you know, she was a freedom fighter and she saw her people get, you know, their hands dirty no matter the cost. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they should have dealt with that somehow. I felt like that was a missed opportunity too.
Yeah, like she wouldn't care if it killed Cardassians, but she's still got to have some like recognition of the fact that
The whole plot, it seems like a plot in like there was it's a boring plot and there was way too much of it. So like everybody's running around shouting their lines at each other and people are getting taken out of the script at like each act where you lose Bashir, you lose everybody. So at the end of it, it's just Odo talking to the Ferengi and Quark and
Quark, because he's got a strong constitution.
right,
yeah, the Ferengi immunities.
right, because Cisco passes out like a little girl immediately after he gets sick.
Oh yeah.
You notice?
Yeah,
He finally comes down with it and then he immediately passes out.
right.
Whereas everybody else powers through and talks gibberish for a while. He's like,
Even Jake was.
It's so funny how the virus affects people depending on how much the show's creators like them. So, like, O'Brien goes first, then Dax,
Yes.
and then, down the line.
Mhm.
And basically, the show's creators likes Odo and Quark the most.
Yeah.
And that's why they're the last one standing. But, no, I feel like this was a missed opportunity on a bunch of different fronts.
Mhm.
Getting to deal with the Cardassian and Bajoran conflict is just one of them.
Yeah.
And here we are again. Here, we're right in front of the wormhole that's holding space gods. And for like the third episode in a row, they don't come into play at all.
Yeah, no-
or even mentioned.
No talk about space gods.
yeah, the scientists that they get to solve it. He's like, oh, you're on that space station that the Cardassians used to have.
That old mining space.
Yeah, the one next to the wormhole that's like saving your planet
Yeah.
from economic, failure.
Exactly. Yes.
That scientist doesn't get the papers. It's like
His
hasn't-
universe.
hasn't been reading the news.
Well, he's right at his desk to take phone calls because she calls and he's like immediately, "What do you need?" And he's right in front of the desk and right like that's a very TV thing.
Right. They even had a perfect opportunity to bring that up as like, oh, he didn't even mention the wormhole. He went straight to the Cardassians. He must know something. That would have been a way to do it.
Just
but-
little things could have worked this episode.
Actually, James, if you think about it, I'm at my desk like right now, and in 2015, if you called me up on Skype, I'd be right here to like. It makes much more sense in 2015 than it does in 1993.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
It does.
To answer calls at your desk.
So, and one more thing that was on my mind that I was thinking of how does, and maybe you guys know this because you guys just know Star Trek better than me, how does the universal translator system work?
Yeah.
Is it like, how,
Magic.
what,
No, I thought it was like a nanotechnology, like where it's actually implanted into your like brain somehow.
I don't think so.
so why couldn't it translate the aphasia?
Because it had to do with perception.
Right. Yeah. No, they explain that when they explain the aphasia. They're like, well, it's your brain changing this thing. It's the brain being aphasic, not the translator.
Right.
So it
Well,
makes sense
I mean, I
that
understand
you
I
can't.
mean, because aphasia is like a real thing, and like I've had family members have issues with that. It happens with strokes and stuff like that. But like, if it's, I assume that the nanobot translators are working with intent, right? This alien is trying to say this, and I can.
Right. Well, they don't. They're not telepathic. They just know every language so well that they can translate it.
So it has to be languages.
No.
It has to be formal languages. It's not just looking at.
But it has to. But if it fits into the language structure that it can identify,
Yeah. Okay.
there's a Next Generation episode where the translators don't work because they have something that's not a regular language or any identifiable way that language is created, so that it can't do it.
That's right.
I forget exactly, but there's precedent.
Yeah.
Yeah, this episode was pretty much awful and doesn't give us a whole lot to work with. One of the bright spots for me was the relationship between Jake and his dad. I thought that was, there isn't a whole lot of examples on TV where you see like a dad being tender towards his son
Touching him.
as much as Cisco is to Jake.
Mhm. Yeah, it was like touching him.
Yeah.
Hugging him and I liked it. It was a good moment. It's yet again, Avery Brooks is making decisions
Yeah.
to work with things that he,
Yeah, that's true.
because he's like rubbing his ears and stuff. And that's like something I would do with my son if I was talking. You know, I come from a family of touchers, so I assume the Cisco's are that too. And so like I like that moment a lot. It was
Yeah, I did too. It felt very real.
Yeah, see, I come from a family of not touchers.
Of not touchers?
And so it makes me real uncomfortable.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my mom, yeah,
Okay.
but like my father, no, we do not express emotion to each other. That's gross.
This is gonna be totally weird. When my dad leaves, or we kiss each other on the lips. I still kiss my son on the lip.
Yeah, see, I don't kiss my mom on the cheek. We hug. I'll hug the shit out of my family, but kissing them, no, feels weird to me. But that's probably my own issues.
Yeah, so James basically would be really comfortable in the Cisco home.
I would be, man. It would be all. It would be lots of jambalaya, because the grandfather is.
Yeah, the food we can do, but
No, that would be great. I would love Cisco.
But I don't ever actually remember. I can't recall in 2015 a show on the air that shows genuine affection between a man and his teenage son,
that's true.
Yeah.
let alone people of color.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Can you guys?
I don't know.
It's kind of revolutionary in that way. You've got an African American man and like raising a son and being able to show that much outward affection. I don't feel like I see that very much. Like, I'm like, that's really nice.
No, I've probably like a hand on the shoulder on the Cosby Show or something. That's about as much as you get, right?
Yeah, and usually on like sitcoms and stuff, the kids are played for laughs, so they're like I'm thinking of, because you said an African American family, so I'm thinking of like the 3 episodes of Blackish I've seen.
Yeah.
And the kids are just all used as comic relief. But I don't know, like, what about the guy from the Walmart commercials and Lawrence Fishburne? Do they like? I don't know. There may be some scenes where they like touch, but I don't think it's like face to face intimate touching like you see on this episode.
I don't
And
think
it seems very organic and very real.
Yeah.
So I think it's a unique aspect of the show. I don't know.
No, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, no, that's good.
It's a good. Yeah, that's a good thing on the show. Like, I wish, and I think that in my story of Avery Brooks is bored, like that. Because I know that he did go on record as saying that he chose to do that, the touching, and the affection, and he even goes so far. This was on a Memory Alpha where he goes, he's like, no, my parents were my parents were hugged in physical contact, and when I still see, well, what's his name, the actor, when I still see him, when I still see Ciroc, I hug him and touch him. It's what he said. So like, I'm like, okay, so he takes it a little further, but like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that was his. I mean, like, I think that I'm getting through a lot of these like things that I'm reading on Memory Alpha that Avery Brooks has a strong familial attachment to Ciroc still. So
yeah, I think that all comes through.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's nice.
yeah. A couple other things. There were 2 references to Ren and Stimpy in this episode.
What?
Oh.
Because there are 2 there is a reference to 2 episodes of Ren and Stimpy because the writers' room were so contentious with each other through the first few episodes that they would take breaks as like team building and watch episodes of Ren and Stimpy.
Wow.
Okay. Could you explain the references? Because I am curious.
The professor that Kira Stoll's name was give me a second here, Sumac Ren. So Ren.
Okay.
And then the Cardassian that's mentioned
Please tell me his name's Stimpy.
is Gol Stimpy. No, Gol Sumpko,
Oh, Spunko.
which I guess is a Spunko. Gol Spunko.
Yeah, that's John Krickafalusi's company.
Yes, so
Spumco is still pretty bad.
yeah, Gol Spunko. And in the Q episode we'll be coming to in the next few weeks, there is reference to a planet Hoek.
Oh, Ren's last name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Ren Hoek. So that's as interesting as it gets, buddies. I was saving that one.
Yeah, clearly. Well, yeah.
Man, that was...
So yeah, I don't. This episode.
Yeah.
What a dog this episode was, wasn't it?
I hate this fucking episode, man. This is so bad. Like, it was so boring to me. And it was
This
also...
one's so bad. It makes you think maybe you don't like Star Trek after you started a podcast about Star Trek.
Well, in the middle, my wife was watching, because she watches the first time I watch it, she watches it with me.
Oh, that's nice.
Or she has been the last few weeks. It's halfway through this, at some point I just said to her, I'm so bored with this episode. She's like, why are you doing Deep Space Nine for a podcast?
Right.
And it was the wrong time to ask me that. I was like, I don't know, honey.
Yeah.
I'm locked in.
Locked in, yes. So she got me at a weak point there.
Yeah.
No, God, this episode is so absolutely boring and absolutely uninspired but like, if you remember, it seems like every season of Star Trek has these kind of like the whole creative process was, damn it, we have to write 22 of these things.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And at best we got 13 good ideas.
Right.
And that's the best you can hope for any show, is 13 good ideas.
Right.
So they're like, you know, pick one off the C pile of ideas and you got to write it.
All right. What would you do to fix this episode? Let's put on your writer's hat for a second. Say,
I can't change the plot. I can't change the overall plot. I got to...
no, they get the aphasia virus. What do you do to make it more interesting? Wade, anything? You got anything?
I would talk about how it's going to affect trade with the wormhole, and but a lot of my things that I have to do with the arc of the season, but they're still stuck in like that anthology episodic, each episode by itself.
Yeah.
At this time in television, that it's hard for them to do that, I guess, because they have to have it self-contained. I would have brought the wormhole into it or something. I don't know. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think the wormhole
More interesting.
I think that's a good point. Like, if you're a writer on this show and you've got a big dog like this, throwing the wormhole at it is like the wormhole could be your lifeline no matter what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think, James? What would you have done?
Well, the biggest flaw I think in it is that there's no... Typically, the best of the shitty episodes at least gives you a character to focus on. Like, how many shitty Next Generation episodes are there about Data?
Yeah.
But you get through them because it's Data. But this, whatever they chose to write a different character per act, it seems.
Right.
Like, you know, it's O'Brien, and then it's Bashir, and then it's Cisco, and then it's Kira, and then it's Odo and Quark are sort of the main characters. So at each point you spend the first 10 minutes almost exclusively with O'Brien, and then you never see him again. He's in a coma. And I think that was sort of what they were wanting, is getting shuttling the cast members out of commission. But you lose the thread there, there's
Right.
no, you can't even walk away from it saying, I think I got some really good characterization and I know O'Brien better as a character, or I know Kira better as a character. There's none of that. So you're just left with, I don't know, everybody had some scenes, and the plot was like a relay race where each person took the baton, but it's a crappy baton, And so it made it to where the episode can only be about the plot line. And that's totally uninteresting. So there was no question. I mean, the drama is let's not die, or the weirdo who's going to blow up the ship because he can't get his thing out of the docking ring. That's the drama. And you don't even know why he's acting so irrationally. So it's just things are happening and everyone's having to deal with it. But there's no, so what I would have done was I would scrap that whole idea. This is an O'Brien episode, or a Bashir, whoever you want to focus on.
That's actually a really good idea.
That you just stay with it, and you can make it like where O'Brien in the whole fifth act has to solve everything while speaking in his Cockney brogue, like where nothing's making sense. And he has to, or they have to learn how to communicate. It's like with charades or something, where they have to
Yeah, because once they get the virus, they don't contribute anything else. Yeah, if they had to somehow learn how to solve it without communicating verbally or something, that would have been the way to go.
You can imagine at the end of it, by the fifth act, O'Brien's got to solve everything and get the guy. He's got to get information to Kira, and he's like having to charade and pantomime everything, and he's dying from this flu, like, and he looks all sweaty and black-eyed, you know, like he looks awful. Like at the end you see him, and then like that cuts to whatever, you know, Stardate, we fixed the problem, and you see him recovered. You know, there's like you felt like you went on a journey with O'Brien.
Yeah, that's the how to make this episode better.
Yeah. That would be the one thing I'd say, but you are given nothing in this show.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I think we pretty well covered it. This piece of shit episode as best we could, don't you think?
Yes, we did. I think we've talked about this episode more than anybody ever has ever.
Do you think? Well, better days are ahead of us.
Yeah. The next episode is the episode where the hunter and the prey come through the wormhole. I love that episode. It's called Captive Pursuit. I believe that's the next one.
Awesome.
Oh, they're back to the wormhole, see?
Yeah, and the first people, we meet the first aliens from the Delta Quadrant.
Awesome. So that gives us something to look forward to next week, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yes, and then we have a Q episode coming up, which I don't know how do you guys feel about Q?
I don't know.
Oh, we'll unpack that in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll have to unpack Q as he comes.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
All
what do
right.
you think? Should we wrap it up?
All right.
Yes, we polished this turd.
I think so. Yeah. Turd is as shiny as it's going to get, and it's all over my hands. Oh. Shit.
All right.
All right, the end. Thanks for listening.
Yes.
Please follow us on Twitter at AcquisitionPod.
Nope Kickers Podcasts actually.
And on Tumblr at the Rules of Acquisition Podcast.tumblr.com. Send us an email at rulesofacquisitionpodcast@gmail.com. You can turn this off now.
So there we go. That was Babel, an infamous episode, I guess, of Deep Space Nine. At least for us, I feel like going through the whole ROA archives, like going even until to the last season, when we're like, oh, this episode was horrible, and like, well, I mean, there's no Babel, or Babel gets brought up over and over again as one that we think ranks among the worst, I guess. So maybe it still does, maybe it doesn't. I'll get into a lot of the things I found interesting just listening to it. I took meticulous notes on this, like I did watching Deep Space Nine episodes of listening to me talk about the Deep Space Nine episodes. Like, though early on, I feel like in the podcast, I didn't take as many notes, for good or ill, maybe ill. I feel like later DS9 ROA, I'm taking so much notes that I'm like doing almost like a plot synopsis beat by beat of it, and that has its benefits and its drawbacks. I think maybe it's nice just to talk about our impressions more instead of trying, like, yeah, people that, if you're listening to a podcast on it, you probably have watched it. You don't need the plot broken down. But maybe you do. Maybe, I don't know. The intro robot voices in it, like the way that we did those kind of changed over the course of the show, didn't it? In this one, it's, yeah, the aphasia robot. I like that. Early on, it's funny, again, like how much we're just like, oh, we're not combative with each other, which is a hallmark of these early episodes of the ROA. I think I say early on, it's a reminder of the show being of its time in the 90s. And unlike later episodes of the ROA, I don't get any pushback on that. You know, it turns into later, I feel like we get into like, yeah, you know, you have to just take it as a thing as the 90s. And then I get more of an eye roll. It's like, well, why can't I just enjoy it or not enjoy it? I don't care if it's of its time. I just don't like it. It's a position that gets taken later on. Not by me. I'm the guy that keeps harping on how DS9 is of its time. But I'm not here. I mean, it's just me talking to you now in my own bathroom by myself. Feels very masturbatory almost, but I'm not here just to shit on James and Hugh, especially these are early episodes. It's like, now that I've got control of the podcast, it's here for me to let out some of my grudges. No, that's not what I'm doing here. Early on, it's also funny, just going through these remix episodes, certain things come up that are kind of hallmarks or things that we do a lot. Like we get a lot of these malapropisms either unintentionally, most of the time unintentional, sometimes, but like for instance, in this one early on, Hugh calls them Kardashians, and we don't bat an eyelid. Partly just because the keeping up with the Kardashians feels like such an easy joke. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna let it go, and then partly just let it go because we know what he means. But when Hugh called them the Kardashians, I thought that was funny. Then later on in this, James referred, not to throw James under the bus, but he does a lot of these too, like where he calls him Brian Braga instead of Brandon Braga. Michelle Nichols. That still makes me laugh. Hugh calling it a show with obligations. I feel like that comes back. Oh, the gibberish. The story of why the gibberish and how the guy wrote it, that was interesting enough. Another thing that made me laugh is James calls this is Ira Stephen Bear's story. He's the showrunner at the time. He didn't really do a lot of scripts, and one, he's not the showrunner. Two, I think James says that he doesn't really do a lot of scripts going forward. It's like, he's the principal showrunner, and a lot of these scripts going forward, he's very involved later, and he's not the showrunner now. So that, I guess that was just not right. James calls it his first credit on a script, and not much after that. How wrong we proved to be there, and nobody called him out on it. Kira's fine for James in this. I think Hugh calls out, so Hugh thought she was pretty good, so we don't have any complaints about Kira in this one. That's another things we do early on in the ROA. We kind of dog on some of these like characters that we grow to love a lot, our favorite characters in a way, like Kira for sure in later seasons. Hugh still is there for her. Me and James are a little bit we're a little more critical, but hey, if this is your first time listening to it, it's cool. We come around. Same with Terry Farrell. In these early episodes, we're pretty rough on her, but in this one, we're just happy to have sex positive Dax back because that's the best Dax. And a couple of these early episodes, she's been kind of a scold, which is not great, but sex positive Dax is great. We do a lot of talking about what Quark still, does he pay rent or what? It was a question I asked, like the show doesn't answer. I was like, well, actually, later on, hold your horses there, Wade. We do know that he does pay rent, or he's supposed to pay rent, and he's got a sweetheart deal for Cisco because the Federation doesn't care about that stuff. But we don't know that here. The writers probably don't know here. It is a little bit harder to figure out what they're doing, and this being a show before the age of difficult men, and yeah, Quark would be a different character post Tony Soprano. And even in this episode, we're like, okay, this is the greatest show we want to pod about. Like, in later seasons, I feel like I'm struggling to talk about this is the greatest show of the 90s, and sometimes I do it a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, and it starts up here on this kind of dog of an episode, as we call it. And this is another thing. We're just starting this 2015. He says this makes sense to be stuck at a desk in 2015. Like, just goes to show how far back it was when we were recording these. Seems like such a simpler time, taking a call at your desk. Back when we started the podcast, doing 4 years of this, I feel like, yes, I'm a Star Trek expert. I've been on panels, about Star Trek, and when I talk to other podcast people, I'm like, yes, I'm a Star Trek expert. I've done a podcast for like 4 years on it. So in this episode, I feel like we're not as much. And going into it, we were okay with that. Like, look, we're more interested in telling the story and critiquing the show in that sense. But even when I'm pointing out, like, oh, there's a TNG episode that does something with the Universal Translator, I don't remember. Like, now being an expert, like, oh, you dork, come on, what kind of Star Trek fan are you? I've felt myself talking to myself in my brain, because of course it's Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. That's the episode I'm talking about. The fact that I'm doing a podcast on it and I can't bring that immediately to mind makes, like, I guess I'm a bad Trekkie at this point, which is, in some ways I kind of miss that, but now I can't put all that back in the box. Pandora's box has been open. I guess I'm a Star Trek nerd now, and that's fine. the rubbing sons and how affectionate Cisco is. That's also an interesting thing to revisit now. Like beginning of a kind of a running little joke that I had going through the podcast, and I don't know how much it's obvious to everybody else. Like my daddy issues where I'm uncomfortable and kind of is getting started here. Like I've got a fairly good relation. No, dude, seriously, no, me and my dad are fine. We are, but I'm not that affectionate. But now I have a son of my own, and the whole like, oh, I don't kiss my mother. Really? That's fine. I'm just not that kind of affectionate. My family doesn't kiss each other. And I'm still that way, but now I have a son, and he's a very cute baby and adorable, and okay, I was like, maybe. Well, now I'm getting all uncomfortable, like with the idea of like, oh, well, how do I approach this? I think I'm a pretty affectionate dad at this point, and I hope this remains so. But I don't know if I'll ever be kissing my son on the lips like James does with his dad, which is fine. But I'm just still a little bit repressed. But there's a few canceled names that come up in this episode. We like talking about black fathers. Cosby comes up. It's like, I guess we knew what was up with Cosby at this point. Like, Hannibal Buress had been talking about it, I think, at this point, but he wasn't he wasn't arrested and in jail at this point. So, man, really different eras, isn't it? James refers to Blackish and that guy from the Walmart commercials and Lawrence Fishburne. I mean, it's Anthony Anderson. He's a very famous actor. That's the name of the guy. I've watched pretty much all of Blackish by this point as well in the 4 years since we recorded this. And their dynamic is also, it's more like my father and myself, where they're not affectionate overly, but they love each other. And, it'll be like, oh, shit, I guess I have to admit that I love you, son. It's kind of like, no, that's closer to my relationship with my father than, say, for instance, James and his. And speaking of canceled people, all the Ren and Stimpy references, John Krickafalusi, it's also since been canceled because he was a creep. Don't need to look that up. It's not great if you're into animation, though. I think at this point, Hugh and I both were Kickstarter backers of a short that he did about canned meat or something. I don't remember, but he's since been he's not as he's a more of a persona non grata at this point, and I think Hugh and I are probably still okay with that. And then we get to the end of this episode, and James is like, "Oh, I hate this fucking episode," and we get the Hugh references, hey guys, maybe I don't like Star Trek anymore. It's like, oh man, 4 episodes in, and we're already. This gets started as a joke now, starting off, and then I think we say, well, we're locked in now. Oh, yeah, there's no going back. Like we've been at this forever. It's like, there's 4 episodes in. We probably could have just bailed at this point, and nobody would have noticed because we wouldn't have grown a listenership, and you wouldn't be listening to me talk about this now if we'd bailed it for. And I'm very glad that we didn't. And, once a week for 4 years, and yeah, I'm very proud of that. Even though doing these remixes, we're not quite as regular because, hey, I don't know if I mentioned it, I had a kid, and so yeah, I'm going to be that guy who keeps bringing up his kid because he's adorable, he's great. And then we get to a segment of the show that later seasons of the ROA kind of fell off. Like after season 4, we were like, no, the show's too good. What can we do with the how would I fix it segment? The show's too good for that. So we just left it behind. And then we get into season 6 and 7. I kind of regret that we didn't bring that segment back more often, because 4 and 5 are pretty spoilers for DS9. Seasons 4 and 5 are probably, we agree, and in hindsight, is probably the height of the show at its power. I don't know, maybe going forward doing these remix things, especially when we get to later seasons, bringing back the how would we fix it segment might be a good way to change up some of these commentary tracks. That's maybe a segment we could bring back in at an added addendum to some of these episodes later on. But I really like it here. Like James is pointing out that if you had a point of view character that you followed through it and made it their story, Can't disagree with that. Sounds great. At the end of the episode, this made me laugh. It's like, well, we've talked about as much about more than anyone ever has about the DS9 episode Babel is something. Said, nope, there's no way we could have possibly talked any more about it, which is kind of extra funny to me because this is a real short podcast, guys. Like, this Babel episode it's under 35 minutes. So to say that we exhausted it, I'm sure out of the myriad of Star Trek podcasts out there, and thank you for listening to this DS9 podcast, by the way, instead of all those other guys. You probably listened to 3 or 4 of them. That's fine. But hey, I'm real glad you listened to this one. But I bet they've talked more than 35 minutes about Babel. I bet there's a 3-hour episode somewhere out there where they do just talk about Babel. But I think we talked about it about as much as we could handle it. But hey, maybe I've talked well more than I needed to on this commentary track. How about that? I don't know. Really bad in the runtime, Wade. Would you just get it over with? But like we pointed out at the end of this podcast, we got something to look forward to next week, which is I think it was the Tosk episode. Is that the one that we were talking about? I don't know. I don't remember, but I remember that one being pretty good. So maybe, well, I probably won't be the guy talking about it then. But yeah, I'm excited to go through all of this stuff. Yeah, let's see, any closing thoughts about Babel? Oh, the outros, that's another thing. I kind of feel bad, like we just kind of insult you for listening to a Star Trek podcast, and okay. Hey, but y'all did, and I'm happy that you listened to me ramble thus far, talking to myself. Yeah, all right. Do all the regular stuff and tell us what you think. We still do voicemails. We're still doing a lot of stuff. We just opened up the Patreon. If you're not a Patreon supporter, for instance, Watchmen, we had the Hashish and Superiority Book Club. We did a Patreon series where we went through Alan Moore's Watchmen, the comic. We opened that up. Now there's that HBO show that I don't think James and Hugh, I don't know if they're watching it. We have some pretty strong opinions about that. Like, it's probably, that show shouldn't exist, but I kind of like it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm canceled. I don't. Anyways, if you're an Alan Moore fan and you want to hear us talk about Watchmen, the comic, go check out the Patreon and check that out for free. And then we got all other stuff for paid things, for instance. Yeah. Shout out to Patreon on Podside Picnic is another podcast. I just was on a guest episode for their Patreon talking about Lovecraft. That was a lot of fun, but you have to go donate to them to hear that. So, why not both? Okay, I feel like I've talked enough, maybe more than this podcast was. But thanks again. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to go see if I didn't wake up a baby, and have a good night, a good afternoon. Beam out. Boop.
It's pretty pathetic that you are still listening. Do you not have friends, or a hobby that is not Star Trek podcast related? That is possibly why people are fearful for the future of our society. We believe in you. We know you are better than this.